I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to the conversation with Al McFarlane. Today is Monday, September 26, 2022. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along today. Mondays, we talk about what I call governance at the neighborhood level. I do this in conjunction with my partners in community from Hawthorne Neighborhood Council. Dee Phillipps is here, and Diana Hawkins is here. Dee, Diana, how are you guys doing? How was the weekend?
Hey, Al, how are you?
I am well. And you?
It's Monday, and I'm not going to talk about the weekend because we all know what happens. But
Well, let's talk about it. Now,
I'm blessed to be here.
Well,
I'm just saying, there's always these shootings, and this Richfield stuff just really broke my heart with these kids. And then they had to cancel school today. I just think this is terrible.
Talk about that for a second. I think it's worth talking about what happened in Richfield. This was on Friday, right?
Well, I think it was Friday, their homecoming, and they had to end up canceling all the events, the dances, and everything for that weekend. 2 people got shot. Don't know if they were students that went to the school, but I know that they were an 18-year-old and a 21-year-old got shot. But then they said that there were some teens that got arrested for the shooting. So, then today, as they were going to school, I guess there was an email that came out to parents stating that classes would be canceled because there were online threats for grades 6 through, I want to say 8 or maybe 12. So it's just terrible. This is getting crazy.
That's so sad to hear. Dee said before the program there was peace in her home, and for that, I think we all have to be grateful and thankful. But we have to also equally be concerned about the violence in the community and the violence abroad. Brenda, how are you doing down there in the mountains of New Mexico?
Hello, everyone. I don't know I don't know how to put this in the box, but we've had a lot of fentanyl deaths. 13, 14-year-olds. And, I saw a thing on the news the other day, and the cartel is using this fine needle to make for sure that they have the right amount inside of the pills. They're using I-25 coming off of the border, and it's because it can go in all of these directions, and it's unreal. It's scary. It really is scary. So, but I'm going to say a positive note. The leaves are changing. It's beautiful. This is my season. I love fall. So I'm going to say good things are ahead. But we better get out and vote. We've got 10 candidates that, if it sways one way or the other, they've got the Senate. So we need to be lined up.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Well, that's really the topic of the day, and I'm pleased to bring our first guest on. In fact, both, but I'll bring the first one as my friend, Corey Day. Corey Day is a former executive director of the Minnesota DFL party. He runs an independent firm now called Blue Ox Marketing. Corey, but he's my go-to guy to get the backstory on local and national politics. Corey, good afternoon. Welcome once again to the conversation.
Hey, Al, thanks for having me.
I said the name wrong, Blue Ox Strategies, so that's the proper name for the company.
Yes, yeah. Thanks for having me, Al. I always loved being on and having this conversation, talking about community and elections. We're less than 50 days to Election Day, and it's an important conversation to be having.
Well, let's go with the high level. What is on your mind when you look at the Minnesota landscape? Also, when you look at local races. Also, when you look at the broader context, America going to the midterms. What are you excited about? What are you afraid of?
Well, I mean, the Dodd decision, what happened with Roe v. Wade, obviously is something that has Democrats extremely fired up. I think it's really, really refocused a lot of folks on what's at stake. I think we've seen women step up in a way that we haven't seen in a long time when it comes to being engaged in a midterm. I mean, we're seeing this in Kansas. We're seeing this all over the country, that folks are really, really looking at this in a way. And it doesn't even matter partisanly. You're looking at Republican women, Democratic women are looking at their rights being taken away by what's going on with the Supreme Court. And I think we're seeing folks get much more engaged. I don't remember the last time we've seen a midterm where, Democrats or whoever the party that wasn't in charge wasn't looking at getting, beat very badly. We're right now in a position where Democrats around the country and in Minnesota right now are looking at gains and the possibility of maintaining, a majority in the House and possibly getting a majority in the Senate. We're seeing this affect the governor's race. We're seeing this affect Keith's race in the AG's office. And we're also seeing this in congressional races all over the country. So it's a very peculiar time, but we're seeing a much more engaged electorate than we usually see around this time in a midterm. And I'm excited about that.
So what do you think about turnout? The predictions are always that you're going to have, by definition, a lighter turnout during the midterms. And when people say that, they often look at our community, Black voters and people of color, as being, one of the reasons why, if we lose seats, lose power. That hasn't really been the case. I think that in the most recent elections, our communities have showed up and have voted. But there still is that narrative that we have to fight, because the narrative itself is part of a disinformation strategy that I think tends to want to create this sense of hopelessness and to dissuade people from enacting, their own rights as voters. But what do you think the impact of that kind of narrative is on this midterm? Do you see our people coming out strong, or what do you think?
I think right now, I think you've seen President Biden put it very clearly. I mean, this isn't the world we were in where you had, red and the blue. We're looking at a different type of Republican, a different type of folks who are coming from that right when it comes to taking away one's rights, one's voting rights, democracy. I mean, there's things on the ballot that we've never seen in our lifetime. And I think it's very clear, and I think it's crystallized for the Black community and other communities, for women, folks of color, that the folks that we're battling, this isn't just a battle for, your typical Democrat versus Republican and, this person where the differences are just a little minute. We're looking at folks who do not believe in centralized government. We're looking at folks who don't believe in one vote, one person, one vote. And we're battling right now an electorate, these Trumpers who truly believe that elections don't matter. And I just think that everyone is looking at this knowing that what's on the ballot isn't just your usual, a Republican promising this and a Democrat promising this. We're looking at folks who do not believe in government, who believes that they honestly believe in some kind of dictatorship in this country.
So let's go to the Trump factor. The recent legal challenges coming towards Trump in the civil court of New York State. What impact is that having on the Trump base, if any? And what impact does it have on those of us who are fearful of what Trump and Trumpism represent? You've described it as a willingness to walk away from, or the uncovering of a disdain for democracy. There are people that have no interest in the real democratic process in our country. So what's happening now on the national level? How do you weigh the ebb and flow of public opinion and voter interest, attention with the most recent revelations?
At least in my opinion, I think what we're seeing, January 6th kind of started to bring it. It's a slow drumbeat. For some of us, we listen to those hearings, and the idea of some of the things that Trump was doing and what his folks were trying to achieve. And it just blows us away. I mean, I listened to those hearings and I just could not believe that that was our country. And there's a part of middle America, it just takes a little longer for that to sink in. And I think right now, after what we're seeing in New York, what we're seeing with what's going on with his family and what the AG and the AG in New York is doing with the January 6th hearings, I think, and also what we're seeing in Mar-a-Lago, where all of a sudden taking, secret documents down to your beach house is something that's okay. But Hillary Clinton's emails, that she should be locked up for it. I think what you're seeing, it's a slow drumbeat, but I think you're seeing our country, the folks who aren't really, kind of that extreme right, are starting to really think, okay, well, it's really time to move past this. And they're starting to really recognize the kind of person, the kind of leader that Donald Trump is. And my hope, and I think we're seeing it in polling, we're seeing Joe Biden's approval ratings going up. We're also seeing members of Congress, we're seeing their polling much better, much stronger. We saw Governor Walz was up by over double digits against Jensen in that public poll that came out a few weeks ago. I really believe the public is starting to look at this, and there's a part of it where they're tired. And they're just ready for some kind of regular normalcy of saying, you know what, let's put our country first, our people first. But all of this Trump mess, it's starting to really kind of play itself out.
So I raised this question with one of my other groups. What if Trump is finally criminally charged, is arrested, is sentenced? Probably won't happen, but what if? And what do you think the 50, 60 million people that voted for him, many of whom still believe everything he's saying, what are they going to do? What are they going to say? Do you think that they are at a point where they say, well, justice has taken its course and we agree? Or do you fear something more crazy might happen? I do. And the people I've been talking to, I've been hearing this language, this conversation about, revolt or civil war. Even that's the phrase I've heard. I don't want to hear that, but I've heard it. And I think that I'd be foolish, at least not to tell myself and my family, if stuff goes crazy, what do we do? Where do we go? So what are you hearing, Corey Day?
I wish I had an answer for it. I mean, me personally, I don't believe Donald Trump's going to go to jail. I just don't believe that we're at that place in our country that will do that. My biggest hope is that he's just not allowed or able to run for president again. I think if we get to the point where these charges stick and some of these things hold, that we just move past Donald Trump, let him go to his beach house and go into the sunset and go away. But I do agree with you. There is an element of this country that honestly believes that, civil war is among us. It's something that can really happen, that these folks really believe that the FBI raided his house and that there's some kind of dark, deep state that's out there that's going against Trump and going against their rights. I wish I had a good answer for it. I really don't. There's a part of me that I just don't understand for the life of me. For the life of me, how folks follow a billionaire from New York who was a Democrat his entire life, who was pro-choice his entire life, has no way to represent these folks in West Virginia or Arkansas or Mississippi, where a lot of his voters are at, believe that he's the answer, the second coming. I don't have any good answers for you. I wish I did.
Diana, you had a question or comment?
I just want to say, Corey, I agree with you, but at the same time, I think that because this man has done so much, they have to make an example of him because he's just done so much wrong. And he's got to pay some kind of way. He may not go to jail, but he's going to have to pay some kind of way. So I do agree with you. And
Diana, I question that because what I point to is our country's convenient amnesia. And we have a history of amnesia when it comes to pointing out deficiency, failure, wrongdoing of the powerful among the powerful. And so they expect ordinary people to say, oh, that's just what they do. Don't worry about it. And therefore, they've been allowed to commit grand theft, grand
Mhm.
theft of our freedom, of our democracy, of our institutions of governance. And I think that's what's at stake. But I criticize and question the Democrats
Mhm.
and the Democrats' ability to play hardball when the other side is playing life or death with the intent of death to the Democrats and to us.
Exactly.
Corey, am I going too radical in this? What do you think?
No, no.
I think Democrats have been accused of being soft for years, and not ever taking it all the way. Like the other side, they're willing to play to the very end. Do I think Democrats have been soft on this Trump issue? Yeah, there's definitely elements where we do not play as hard as the other side plays. But I will also say this, our tent is a lot bigger, and there's a lot more people in it, a lot more diversity of ideas in our tent. And I think when you're inside their tent, it's really easy when everybody marches to the same beats all the time. Our tent, we have some hip hop over here, we got some country music over here, we got some soul over there. There's a lot of different ideas, and it's much harder for us to just all of a sudden, methodically just march at the same beat. And I think when it comes to this Trump issue, I think we all do agree that something has to happen. The degree of what has to happen, I think you're obviously going to have different opinions and different ideas. But I am 100% in agreement with Diane. I agree with you 100%. Al, we are at a critical point in our country when it comes to having someone who literally tried to overthrow the government. As folks have said, and I think everyone has heard this analogy, if that was a Black Lives Matter rally in January 6th, there'd be a lot of Black blood on the Capitol. Mm-hmm. And I think what we have to look at right now is we can't let the other side get away with it. The question is, how does this look? I don't have a great answer for you, but I agree with you. We can't just say, okay, well, shake our hands of it. You guys try to overthrow the government. You guys try to steal elections. You try to, have election judges change votes. You literally have done everything you can to dismantle this democracy. Something has to come about. I don't disagree with that. I just don't know how far Democrats are going to go with it.
Wynfred Russell is running for mayor of Brooklyn Center, I believe. Is that right, Wynfred? Brooklyn Park, my mistake. Mayor of Brooklyn Park. He's a city council member in Brooklyn Park. Brooklyn Center, Brooklyn Park, the two Brooklyns, they call them here in Twin Cities for those who are listening from around the country or around the world. And Brooklyn Center, Brooklyn Park are two communities that have exponentially expanding Black populations. I think Brooklyn Park, the greater of the two, you'll correct me if I'm wrong. But Wynfred, good afternoon. Welcome to the conversation. And I want Corey to hang out with me with this conversation with you as well. Would you talk about your tenure on city council and your bid to be mayor of Brooklyn Park? And where I want to go with the conversation is, how governance works in neighborhoods at the city council level. But I also want to come back, Corey, to the fact that we've got about $9 billion of surplus sitting over at the state. How do neighborhoods like Brooklyn Park, North Minneapolis, community cities like Brooklyn Park, Brooklyn Center, and Minneapolis get access to the resources we need to improve the quality of life of our residents, our communities? Brother Wynfred, good afternoon and welcome. Yeah, unmute there. Here we go.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon, and it's great being here, and especially to see my former classmate Diana. It's wonderful being on the panel with her and having to discuss all of these issues. That is, issues that are pertinent to the quality of life of our folks here in the northwest suburbs. So it's a great honor and opportunity to be here with you all.
Well, talk about your political career, first of all, where you are now, how you got there, and where you're headed.
Well, thanks. I think you touched on this a little bit in the beginning, and that is, and I mean, we will dig deeper later on, but I believe, and one of the things that I had to learn pretty quickly was that it's very different advocating and being an organizer or being an activist and governing. Those are two different things, and I learned pretty quickly that uh, uh, activism and governing are really diametrically opposed from each other. So I've been an organizer and activist and a community advocate for a very long time prior to joining the council, and I've served so many years on the council in the neighborhood, trying uh, to advance policies, help to improve the lives of people of color, especially. And I decided that I needed to be at the table, to have representation. We needed representation at the table, and because as you all know, the saying goes that if you're not at the table, you're part of the menu, and you know what happens when you're part of the menu. You get eaten up, and especially when you have such a large group of BIPOC community folks in the northwest suburbs, especially Brooklyn Park. I mean, Brooklyn Park is the fourth largest city in the metro, and our population is about 90,000. And out of that 90,000, you have about 24% of our population is foreign born, at 61.2% people of color. So we have a pretty, not pretty, but a very diverse city, one of the most diverse cities in the state, together with Worthington and Brooklyn Center. Brooklyn Park is one of the largest and most diverse in the state, but we did not have representation. So for a very long time, we did not have representation. So for me, it just came natural. It's like, we've been in the trenches, we've been at the front line, advocating for a whole host of things, social determinants of health, access to resources, closing the racial disparity gaps, health equity, and a whole bunch of things. And so when the opportunity availed itself, I felt it was time to step forward to try to provide leadership and representation, on the city council, making me the first Black person to be elected on the city council of Brooklyn Park in 2018. So that's where we are, and that's where I've been the last 4 years.
How has that been? What's been your learning? What's been your accomplishments as you see it? What have been the challenges to moving from the advocacy side to the management side, to the council side? And I'm interested in that distinction that you've drawn. You said that being a part of the governance structure is almost diametrically opposed to being an advocate. Explain that some more, if you would.
Yeah, and I think for me, especially in the suburbs, right? Especially in the northwest suburbs, I can speak for. But and I believe most of the suburban cities outside of Minneapolis and St. Paul, you will find this sort of dynamic playing out. What I mean by that, so when I got in the council, there was no role model. There was no one to look to say, okay, there was no script or playbook as to, how do you advance the issues that you've been advocating for? How do you advance that to policy, to becoming policy? And as an advocate, we're pushing a lot of issues, working with a whole host of groups from Minneapolis, from Washington, D.C., and in the community, of course, issues around, wealth creation, transportation, uh, um, diversity within our, our transportation plan, community benefit agreement. For example, when Target was building its complex out in Brooklyn Park, we're pushing to say, okay, what do we get, as a community? And I quickly, realized that, I mean, yes, we're working with a number of these organizations, pushing the envelope, pushing policymakers to do the right thing and all of that. But then when I became a policymaker, I quickly realized that you needed to build partnership. You needed to build partnership with the folks on the council and with with the power that be to make some of these things make these things happen. Because at the end of the day, you just have one vote, and your one vote cannot make a difference. So you cannot come in with a sledgehammer and try to tear down walls and try to tear down these structures. The way you tear down the structures is by building relationship, and it's one of the things that we've been able to do. And why we've been successful is that we've been able to build some really strong relationship with folks in Congress. When the For example, the Liberian immigrant community had this immigration issue that they wanted to see through. They have been having this issue for almost 30 years, of being in some sort of immigration limbo. And when I came on, I mean, I was an advocate. I've been advocating for that prior to coming on. And when I came on, there's an opportunity because in Brooklyn Park, for example, you have a large West African population, and the Liberians are one of the largest group. But we're looking at it from a dollars and cents perspective, and how because what would have happened was that the U.S. government was going to send back all these Liberians who have been living here for about 30 years. They have families, they have kids, they have businesses. They were pumping a lot of money into the economy. So our bottom line was being impacted. So I work with other communities, other cities. And so that's my constituents coming to me and say, wait, we need you to, to push us, to help us. Because as you know, at the city level, we're not in charge of immigration. So that's where building relationships became very critical and very important in making sure this passed. And so we reach out to congressional leaders, Dean Phillipps, Amy Klobuchar, Tina Smith, Ilhan Omar, and the Republicans. We have to bring the Republicans on board, and working with many of the local organizations and all of that. And we made the case and said, look, this is an existential threat to us as a city, because we have this large number of Liberian immigrants here. If you guys kick them out, our schools are going to suffer. Our property values are going to suffer. Our businesses are going to suffer. So the city of Brooklyn Park, we put our muscles, we put a lot of resources in, and to try to make that happen. And if you check, you will see that during the Trump administration, the passage of the LRIF, okay, what was then DED, Deferred Enforced Departure Provision, there was an act that was passed. It was signed in by the Trump administration. It was the only immigration issue bill that passed during the Trump administration, that was signed into law by Donald Trump. I mean, DACA was going on, a lot of other things were going on, but that was the only thing. I know a lot of the media didn't pick it up. I mean, some did, but
What does LRE stand for? What is it?
LRIF, the Liberian Refugee Immigration Fairness Act.
Okay.
It was put into law, and why was that? So it was successful again because of those partnerships. So all of these years we've been advocating for this, the passage of this, to give immigration relief to these folks. When I got on the council, because of these relationships we were able to build, we were able to push these through. So that's how important it was, and it was completely different. So we have to know how to work together and to make some of these things make these things happen. And that it cuts across with the whole host of other issues, COVID-19 response. I mean, a whole host, affordable housing and crime prevention and all of that. It's about building a solid base, a solid relationship, to make some of these things and go through.
You mentioned the demographics of the city of Brooklyn Park. What's the ethnic composition of the city council now? You said you were the first person of African descent on the council. Who else is there with you now?
So since and things have changed so for the good now, things have changed so dramatically in the last 4 years. So as of now, we have a 7-member council. Okay. And of that seven, we have BIPOC community folks who represent the majority on the council. So we have 2 Blacks and 2 Asians. So that's 4 out of the 7.
And the mayor is?
The mayor is white.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, is white.
And but is not running again?
No, the mayor is retiring, and she's endorsed me to run. So that's how I decided to put my name in it, in the hat. So I'm on the council now. My term expires in December 31st, and so the mayor is stepping down, and so she has endorsement to run.
So regardless, there'll be a new Black mayor.
Yes, for sure.
Because the other candidates running now are also African Americans. I think Holly's Winston is competing with you, and probably based on the results of the primary, you could describe him as the leading candidate. He came out of the primary with about 55% of the vote. Also in the race against or with you and Hollis is Boyd Morrison, who showed up with 16.78% of the vote. You came up with 27, almost 28% of the vote. So you've got a struggle, a fight on your hand, I think, from the way I read these numbers. How do you see closing the gap and overtaking Hollis Winston, for instance, and coming out the new mayor? What's your game plan?
Well, thank you. We don't. I mean, we exactly where we wanted to be. I think what it shows is that. So I'm a Democrat. I endorsed by the Democratic Party when I ran for city council. I did not go for the Democratic Party endorsement this time around because at the time the convention and all that was going on, I had not made up my mind whether I was going to run for mayor, and Lisa, the current mayor, was still contemplating whether she was going to run or not. So that process passed me by. So I think what you see, the reflection of that, is that there were a lot of Brooklyn Park is a DFL town. So about 75% of the registered voters here are, vote, Democrat. So I think what the numbers show you there, Al, is that there were a lot of Hollis got the Democratic, endorsement. So you had a lot of, you have the big, DFL machinery. Even though the election is nonpartisan. Okay, it's a nonpartisan race, so I mean there's no party label to our names when you go into vote. So we're pretty confident that we will succeed. I mean, given our track record and given the way things have been playing out here in the city, I mean, as far as I know, and you can do your own research, as far as I know, there's been no DFL endorsed candidate who has won the mayoral race in Brooklyn Park, including the most recent one that took place. We have about 49,000 registered voters in Brooklyn Park, and out of the 49,000, only 7,000 voted in the primary. So we still have about 42,000 people to reach out to. So my game plan is reaching out to everyone, to those 42,000 and the 7,000 who voted. So we have about 10,000 doors to knock. It's not an easy feat. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be tough. But the result of the primary is not necessarily a harbinger of what is to come, because we've seen it time and time again. Many DFL endorsed candidates who have received more votes during the primary, they've fallen short during the general election. And because once you get to the general election and get to this level, I mean, it's pretty much a reset button. I mean, clearly you want to be in that position than being in the other position, but
Sure.
yeah, but it is what is happening. I mean, I think people are looking at experience, they're looking at track record, they're looking at so even if you're talking about change, I see myself as change, because when I came in, there was nobody who looked like me. There was nowhere to turn. I was turning, and as a result, I formed an organization that is now supported by Nexus Community Partners to help first-time BIPOC folks elected in the suburbs outside of Minneapolis and St. Paul, because of the challenges that many of us had. If you look, in 2018, we elected a slew of BIPOC folks for the very first time. You have one in Blaine, one in St. Louis Park, one in Moorhead, in Centerville. I mean, Brooklyn Center has always had minority folks there. So people have seen that, and people know that. And because of that track record, and because of what I've done over the years, and not just what I've done, but the results that I've produced, that's why I have the endorsement and support of the current mayor, the immediate past mayor, who is now Hennepin County Commissioner Jeff Lundy, have his support, and 5 of the 7 city council members, all are supporting my candidacy, because experience matters. And I think that's what a lot of the folks are saying. I mean, many folks stayed away during the primary, but the general election, it would be a completely different ballgame.
2 questions, and Corey, get ready to come in this conversation if you would. One is, what does Minnesota, what ought the state be doing? What could the state be doing for the residents of Brooklyn Park with the utilization of the $9 billion surplus? That's one. Separate from that, when I think about your community becoming majority owned, not owned, but controlled by people of color, and the potential, the certainty of a Black mayor. So you have a Black run town after this election. I think about Jackson, Mississippi. I think about other places around the country that have gone from, being white run, white controlled, even with majority populations that are people of color, till eventually people of color are able to insert themselves through the ballot into leadership. And then what I see is a pattern of flight of capital. The money leaves. White people say, if I can't run it, I'm taking my marbles and I'm going somewhere else. And so what kind of danger is there for a Brooklyn Park that has a Black mayor and a majority of city council that is of color? Is there a fear or a likelihood or possibility that the companies, that the civic associations, that the economy that's positioned for growth will atrophy, will disappear, dissipate? Will white people take their money and leave because now they're not in control, or at least they perceive themselves not in control as they had been before? So 2 things. What is ahead given the leadership change? And then how do you leverage the power of your electorate, of your community size, to support and get what you need from the state treasury, from the governor, presuming that the Democrats prevail and have more control over the budget after this election? Big question. And then when you jump in, Corey, whenever you want to.
Well, Councilman, are you?
Oh, okay. No, I thought you were about to say something there. No, I think this is a real issue, Al, that you touched on. It's not lost on me that right now um, there are people leaving the city. There's a white flight we see now because of crime and the perception of crime as well, and what is happening in neighboring cities. You know. Um, uh, folks, there's no question about it. Folks, I've read some folks, would be afraid, and some folks will leave, and that's going to be a critical issue, for us. But that's part of why they were looking at experience, and like I said to you, experience matters. I think they um, what folks have seen, many of these folks who may be considering leaving because now we have the city is now being run by black folks. I think what they were seeing is that they were seeing um, um, uh, an experienced hand. So this is not just somebody who has not been involved in and who have not built this relationship, but who's been involved in managing multi-million-dollar budget prior to coming to the city. Before I I I became a city council member. I mean, yes, I may not have understood the inner workings of the city, even though I've been involved. But that's what 4 years has done. 4 years has taught me that all of that. Coupled with my experience, 4 years as a planning commissioner, on the planning commission, 2 years as a member of the Human Rights Commission, 3 years on the Hennepin County Library Board. So, we pay our dues, and we've and along the way we've gotten a lot of experiences, and we've built a lot of bridges. So I come to this position, managing federal budget of over $8 million, pretty close to about 7.9, almost $8 million. And I think that confidence, and I have a pretty good name recognition of being around, so to know that the city is going to be in trusted hands, and so that's why it's critically important for us, and that we have the support not only by words but by deeds, the support of the current mayor in terms of door knocking and going out there and supporting us, the former mayor and all of the city council, because we are concerned about what you just mentioned, Al, and so that's part of why they want to come around and they were coming around me and support me, because it is critically important that we have the city in very steady experience hand. I mean,
I'm going to have
again,
to come back and talk about the Treasury surplus, but
yes,
go to Corey Day first.
Yeah.
Corey, what about that money sitting over there in St. Paul that people could use? And you tell me if I'm wrong. The money is not being deployed as the governor and the Democrats would have it, because Republicans are blocking it. They're using the power of their majority, their control of the Senate, to kill any initiatives to distribute, deliver relief, resources, enablement to a lot of communities in Minnesota. And they're doing that for two reasons. One is maybe philosophical. They think that all the money should be given back in the form of tax cuts to rich people, businesses, and anybody else, operatively, businesses and rich people. But they also see this as an opportunity to string out the governor and the administration and to paint them as do nothing while they have their hands tied. So what about that money that's over there, and what could and should happen, and how do people like the future mayor of Brooklyn Park and other colleagues get at resources they need to build city, build community?
Well, I would just say, just full disclosure, I'm a supporter of Hollis Winston for that in the mayor's race, and Hollis has the support of the congressmen and all the elected leaders in that district when it comes to the House and the Senate and the governor and the
Thank you for the disclosure. Thank you for being
Oh
transparent.
yeah, so for full disclosure, and then I would also say that those are the kind of relationships when it comes to bringing money and resources back to your community you need. As I know the councilman was talking about the former mayor who was a Republican and the mayor before that who was a Republican. I do believe having the support of the party that is, when it comes to local elections, the party that's in power in St. Paul is very helpful. And I do believe that as I look at Hollis, who's put together one strong coalition of elected officials and community leaders in Brooklyn Park as he lost by two votes in the past election, and he did very well in his primary, and it's put together wonderful election going into November, has relationships with the governor and with the legislative leadership to make sure that the city is going to get the resources that are necessary to make sure the citizens are taken care of. And I think the other piece that is very critical right now, especially when it comes to this election, is public safety. Another candidate for disclosure I'm very supportive of is Judge Martha Demick, who I believe is, the reality is that we have to get our community safe. We have to make sure that we're handling a public safety in a real way, where we're actually really addressing the issues that are not just happening in the city, but throughout the county. And then when it comes to St. Paul, Al, I would say the Republicans are playing with people's money. Let's just be honest here when it comes to how long it took to get the hero pay for folks who are actually working during the pandemic. There's so much money. It's such a surplus in St. Paul. And the reality of it is Republicans, they're not just dragging it out because they believe in giving it back in tax cuts. They're dragging it out because they had the belief that they were going to win in November, and they wanted to control how that money was spent. We have watched when it comes to Supreme Court justices on a national level what Republicans have done, and we're watching Republicans now play with people's lives. We have a massive surplus of money sitting there in St. Paul that can help municipalities, communities, that can help people of color. There's so many things that I know that friends of ours advocated and different organizations try to bring those dollars into communities to be helpful that we weren't able to do because the Republicans, let's be honest, this isn't me being a partisan dog or something. The Republicans held up real dollars that could help people in throughout Minneapolis, St. Paul, and throughout this state. I'm not just urban, but when it comes to rural areas, suburban areas, there's parts all over the state we need that help. And they held those dollars up because they believed that they wanted to play politics, not give the governor a win, and wanted to spend that money themselves when it came to November because they believed that they were going to win. Now, everyone's a little bullish on those Republicans now after the Dodd decision. We're starting to see some of the things that have been going down when it comes to the things that President Biden has gotten done for this country, that they're now wondering, where they're going to land come November. My hope is that we have serious-minded people in St. Paul come November, and we get that money where it needs to in this state to help folks out and help out municipalities who are in dire need after COVID of those dollars.
Wynfred, how would the city of Brooklyn Park use money? What is needed from your point of view as a council member, and as you see yourself sitting in the mayor's office, what kind of utilizations would you be taking surplus money for? What are the needs in Brooklyn Park as you see it?
Thank you, Al. But before I answer that, though, let me just correct a few things that Corey just mentioned. Let the record reflect that even though this is a nonpartisan race, like I mentioned earlier, many of the cities outside of Minneapolis and St. Paul, they all have nonpartisan races. But Mayor Lisa Jacobson is not a Republican. So I know it's pretty easy for us to be throwing these labels and stuff around, but it's not true. Jeff Lundy, Commissioner Lundy, is a Republican and ran on the Republican ticket as sort of moderate Republican. He's at least from what he's told me, he's not active, a Republican. But having said that, this is a non-partisan partisan race. I'm going to be representing the aspirations and the interests of the residents of Brooklyn Park. So even though I'm a Democrat, but it's not as a
Wynfred, I mean, feel free to draw a distinction between yourself and Hollis Winston. And as I mentioned, the numbers from the primary put him at a substantial lead over you. You've dealt with that already, but if you want to go deeper into that, please, this is for you to talk about Wynfred Russell. So
yeah, I appreciate it. But go back to the question that you asked. Yeah, I just wanted to clear that up. There's nobody with a deeper relationship in this community of anyone running than I do. I've been here, 20, lived here 20 years. I serve on many commissions, and I have very deep roots in this community. I built a correlation. So I think we talked earlier, talk about a contrast. We talked earlier, and I mentioned to you all the work that we did to pass immigration relief for a group of African immigrants. The work that we've done to provide resources for residents and especially BIPOC folks throughout the state of Minnesota, including those in Brooklyn Park around COVID-19. It's about working with our congressional leaders. I have a very deep personal relationship with both the governor and the lieutenant governor and Dean Phillipps and Tina Smith and Amy Klobuchar and all of these folks in producing results. We just opened a small business center, incubation center here in Brooklyn Park. We got, there was a request from the community, and we got some money from Dean Phillipps' office and Tina Smith's office to help, to make that happen. So my relationship with these congressional folks, and even at the state level, we just broke ground for the expansion of a mental health hospital we have here in Brooklyn Park. The state legislature provided some of those resources to make that happen. So the relationships are there. I'm talking cell phone contact, one-on-one, contact. When Tina Smith ran the last time, she reached out to me for my endorsement, which I did. Gladly did. So, those relationships, are there, and that's part of the relationship we are going to leverage to be able to do what we need to do here in Brooklyn Park. There's a $9 billion surplus, affordable housing. The legislature did not pass the bill to support affordable housing and rental assistance in the state. So we've been working closely with the county to get some resources from the county. So we need some of that money to fix up some of our aging apartment complexes in Brooklyn Park. We have the largest concentration of apartment complexes in the state of Minnesota. We have the second largest apartment complex in the state of Minnesota is located in Brooklyn Park. Almost 85% of the residents who live in that particular apartment complex is of color, and many of them are, struggling. I know the challenges people are having because I coordinate the state of Minnesota COVID-19 response, not just in the metro, but in Worthington, where I work with migrants there, refugees there as well, in Northwest Minnesota, in Tea River Falls, in Crookston, in East Grand Forks, in the Northeast, Virginia and Duluth, working with BIPOC community folks, African American out there, Native American, to try to provide resources for them due to challenges that they've received from COVID. So being able to access those resources, I mean, some of this $9 million surplus that the state has would definitely go a long way in helping us provide transportation services here in the city, with our apartment complexes in disrepair, some of them, but especially our rental assistance. people are struggling. People are struggling. They need food. They need help with their utilities. They need help to pay their rent. And I think some of that money will go a long way. And we didn't get any LGA this year. And it's hurting a lot of the programs and services that we provide, especially for our youth. Increasing the youth programs to here in the city, as part of our crime prevention and crime reduction strategy. I mean, that's one of the big things is on crime and the resources that we need to provide, especially around youth program intervention. So there are a lot of different places. Our water our system, we have hard water in Brooklyn Park. We need about $14 million to fix our water. We cannot. We don't want to pass. The council doesn't want to pass that bill on to residents. But that what. To keep property taxes as stable as possible.
Could
but those
what
are some of the
happened
things
in
that we
Jackson,
need.
Mississippi happen to Brooklyn Park?
Well, not quite that level. It was just that it's just in the taste. I mean, the quality of the water is good. It's healthy.
Not so much water, but the problem of capital flight, of the inability of the city to maintain its economic vitality.
Mm-hmm.
I think in Mississippi, I heard comments that part of the problem with the water was that the residents weren't paying their water bills on time. Well, that's like, poppycock. That's like a cop-out blaming the consumers for a failed enterprise and system, but it's convenient to blame Black people. So the question is, you've got a community that I'm not sure what the composition of home ownership is versus renters, but you obviously have a lot of renters.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what the revenue base for the city is. Is it in, property tax, tax on renters, and what is the potential for a disaster, economic disaster, if certain sectors flee the city?
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, I mean, yeah, that's part of the concern. But I mean, the city is in a good position. It's on solid footing now. In fact, we're working on the budget as we speak. We have a balanced budget. I mean, we got, like I said, we didn't get a lot of LGA, and we don't want to increase the fees on services because that's a way to try to close up some of those deficit. But you are right, Al. I think you're on point with that. I mean, it's part of the worry that may happen. But as we speak, as of now, the city is being properly run. There are a lot of things that in my leadership. I mean, a lot of things that we just continue to improve. We're in this sort of continuous improvement type process.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's part of why it's critically important to to keep the city in really solid, stable hands, because anything that go wrong, I mean, our BIPOC community folks, our African and African American folks, and other minority folks are going to feel the brunt of it.
We got to leave it right there. Out of time.
All right.
What a good conversation. Thank you and good luck, Corey Day. Thank you, Corey Day, Blue Ox Strategies, and also speaking on behalf of your friend and colleague Hollis Winston. Thanks to Diana and Brenda and Dee. And thank you for listening, for watching. We want you in this conversation. We're thinking about moving the Monday conversations to Tuesday so that they have the advantage, the additional reach that we have with the live broadcast on KFAI. We haven't decided that yet, but we know that the issues in front of our community in the political arena are broad and critical, and we want to make sure that we've done all we can with our digital strategies, with our newspaper, with our activism to ensure that you, voters, listeners, residents, viewers, have the information you need to make the best decision you can. I'm Al McFarlane. We'll see you tomorrow, 1 o'clock. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.